Welcome to ThinkTech on OC16, Hawaii's weekly newscast on things that matter to tech and to Hawaii. I'm your host, Duke Oishi.
And I'm your co-host, Maria Kashem.
In our show this time, we'll cover the Hawaii Business Breakfast program at the Plaza Club called Building a High Performance Board.
It featured board management expert Jay Conger and a panel on how Hawaii companies can build better boards.
First, Jay Conger made opening remarks to warm up the subject and the panel.
So let me begin on our journey of boardroom best practices. And I think it's important to help us all understand kind of how do you leverage certain practices to build an exceptional board. I've been very fortunate. The research I've done, I've both witnessed boardroom meetings and I've interviewed many board members as well as CEOs. And I've interviewed them from successful companies, successful not-for-profits, to unsuccessful corporations and not-for-profits. And I'd like to tell you there's a perfect board out there, but it doesn't exist. The best boards are still trying to be the best they can be. Any group of people working hard still has lots of dilemmas to face, but I think there's certain things that will ensure you at least have a very high caliber board. But let me actually go back in history a little bit, and I'd like to welcome you to the boardroom of the mid-20th century. It was a really wonderful place to be. It felt more like a country club. You were invited to the club, and often you were invited to belong to many clubs. It was not unusual as a board director to sit on a dozen boards. And by the way, you were also the CEO of a company. So you had a busy schedule. In addition to that, you sat on many not-for-profit boards, the United Way, the Red Cross. I'm not quite sure how you found time to run your company, but that was all right. You had talented people to run the company while you did your boardroom activities. We actually nicknamed it the Country Club because, as you can see, it had that kind of feeling of the cigar library room. And board meetings were very congenial. They were held a few times a year. They usually involved a very nice opening dinner the night before. And then the next day was devoted to the issues facing the company that the board needed to be aware of. The discussions were congenial, and usually everyone left feeling quite good about the company and quite good about their CEO. This model worked very well in the era of the 1950s and essentially through the 1960s and up into the 70s, in large part because North America was the dominant industrial power of the world. And so it was pretty easy to do well. As a matter of fact, the sins of poor CEOs were pretty well hidden in the revenue growth and the profit growth of those organizations. And so even though it was cozy, you could be a pretty mediocre CEO and do well and have a congenial board. Warren Buffett loves to say that you only know who's been swimming naked when the tide goes out. And in the 1960s and 70s, the tide was still in for North America. So there were very few innovations. You can see the demographics. What do you notice about the diversity in the room? Yeah, you got to be at least in your 50s and maybe a bit older. Help to be male. And the boards were actually very interesting. They were comprised more heavily of insiders. You would have had your CFO. You might have had a COO. You probably had somebody else, maybe marketing, whatever the strong suits in the company were. They were all members of the board. Today, you would never see that. You had the law firm that represented you on the outside. The head of the law firm often sat on your board. Maybe two of your bankers were on the board. Matter of fact, there were very few true outsiders. Pretty much everybody had a connection to the company. So on one hand, they all had a vested interest because they were all getting a share of however the company did. But you could argue they all had a vested interest in the CEO. It was very hard for them to play more of a monitoring role.
Then there was a drilled-down discussion among the panel, which consisted of corporate leaders Mike Akane, Don Horner, and Crystal Rose. The moderator for the panel was David Tomilowitz, publisher of Hawaii Business Magazine.
Whether or not it's profit or nonprofit, the role is similar in that you have overall oversight for the company, and your duties and responsibilities operate at that level.
I think there's clearly a structural framework that as board members, we're responsible to implement. But what I really cued in on, which I got excited about, that Jay talked about, is the responsibility that we have to develop a culture, a tone within the company that sets an example. The interfacing and interaction we have as colleagues on the board, as well as the interaction and culture of that relationship between us and management. And I think that is clearly a responsibility of leadership to establish whatever that culture is.
Personally and corporately, I find a board is very effective when they ask very simple, basic questions of themselves and the company in general, like who's your customer? What's the vision? What's our mission? A lot of times those questions don't get answered very well. And more often it's the board's job to also answer the tougher question, what is not our mission? What is not our customers?
Each of the three of you serve on numerous boards, both for-profit, not-for-profit. You have a tremendous amount of experience in this community. What do you see as maybe low-hanging fruit for boards in this community where they have the opportunity for improvement, or when you step onto a board, are there certain things that you sometimes see that you think that you can add immediate value and kind of helping that board achieve its potential?
There's a huge opportunity for overall development of leadership in our community. We are on the cusp of a change in leadership, and we've seen it in many different ways. But right now, what we all need as leaders is to develop the next generation of leaders. Some of them are there, some of them are not. And I think through our board work and through our community work, that's a huge, huge opportunity right now.
I think there's two schools of thought about how this should happen. I think there's one school of thought coming from a young perspective that says, I'm waiting for you to give up some authority and let me be, that person. And then there's another school of thought that I think is equally or even maybe more compelling. And it came out of a speech kind of like this, and I wasn't there. It was told to me by a friend, and maybe you folks know him. John Radcliffe said it. You'd expect him to say something like this, and it was somebody making this argument, like, come on, man, give it up, give us a chance. And he came back and he said, no, I'm not going to give it up. If you want it, come and get it.
How many people in their early 30s are we putting in those sort of positions of responsibility today? But maybe to the point of this discussion, is the boardroom the opportunity for these leaders to emerge?
I had the privilege of starting my career as a 21-year-old naval officer a lot of years ago. And that gave me an opportunity to have responsibility pretty early. And I really I look back now and just reflect on the level of responsibility that those captains, so to speak, of those ships and what have you, gave to 22-year-old kids. And I have a son that's about that age. It's pretty frightening to think about, frankly, at this point. But all my life, at least through business, we've tried to, at least in our institutions, give younger folks responsibility very, very early. Succession planning should begin very quickly.
After the discussion, we took a walk around to sample the reactions of those who were in attendance. As you will see, they were very enthusiastic about the program.
I learned a lot, and I was real grateful to be on stage with Jay and what he brought to the table.
Clearly, board leadership is critical to success of a business, especially in a nonprofit community.
All these ideas of best practices only flourish in a culture that really supports them.
The Hawaiian leadership community is very engaged and also very insightful.
I'm going to go back to my boards and tell them that we need to be a little bit more involved.
It was a great day. We learned about, I enjoyed the diversity piece of putting a board together.
It was awesome. And for me, the timing is perfect because we're looking at our PAXA board and how that should be restructured.
And those sensitive things like diversity, age, demographics of our community, representation on the board. So all of those things, I think, were discussed here and brought up.
I thought it was great and good information. I'm going to go back and share it with a board that I belong to.
In Hawaii, we have an environment where bringing those young or new board members into the mix, getting them trained in some succession planning, it's a topic that everybody's dealing with.
I kept thinking about raising the bar of conversational capacity in the board. You want the board to be able to talk about more and more difficult issues.
Crystal Rose really captured it. She said is courage, and that to me this was all about really a call to board members to be courageous and to express leadership.
Oh, it was an outstanding meeting. It went a long way to do both validate some of the items that I do, the way I do things on different boards, and gave me some great insight into some new ideas that I'm going to take back and share with other board members.
It was a great program. I think it was very beneficial to all the nonprofits as well as the for-profits.
The program was sold out and 200 people came to see it. This shows the importance and popularity of the subject and the level of interest in the business community.
It seemed clear that better boards are boards with diversity in gender, ethnicity, and demographics, and that better boards working together mean better companies and a better economy for Hawaii.
This was a story of business and social interaction, entrepreneurship and psychology, among other things. It was a story every Hawaii business person needs to know, and every aspiring executive and board member needs to learn.
It bespeaks of the emergence of a new business generation in our state, one that will depart from old norms, find greater vertical mobility for our young people, and in so doing, take our state and our economy to new heights.
Thanks, Hawaii Business Magazine, for organizing this great program. These programs are an important service to the business community, and we look forward to seeing more of them in the future. And now, let's take a look at our ThinkTech calendar of events going forward.
Check out ThinkTech's 4 to 5 p.m. Drive Time radio series on KGU 760 AM for Energy on Wednesday, Asian Review on Thursday, and ThinkTech Fridays on Friday. We also stream all our shows on the internet. Visit thinktechhawaii.com for our live stream and YouTube links, and raise your awareness on ThinkTech Hawaii.
On April 28th, HBCA and ThinkTech will present a luncheon program at the Plaza Club entitled Hawaii's Growing Financial Connections with Asia. The program will be moderated by financial manager Varian Allen. You can sign up for these programs on hbca.org.
And now, here's Bill Spencer, president of the Hawaii Venture Capital Association, with this week's Spensation.
The bill that was hoped to extend the lease for the Manoa Innovation Center on Woodlawn Drive. First, it was cut from the request of 25 years to 10 years, but now, a few days ago, it failed. The bill was deferred. And so that's over this year, and Isaac Choi, the representative in Manoa who has supported that bill, said that he would introduce it again next year. But for the moment, there's no bill that would extend the lease for the Manoa Innovation Center, and in 2015 it will expire. The lease will expire. There was another bill, or maybe it was the budget, calling for, I think, $54 million to build another, maybe kind of downscaled version of MIC somewhere else near the university, and that failed. So no money was appropriated by the legislature to build another MIC. So the legislature has, on the one hand, at least by this session, said there will be no extension of the lease, And on the other hand, it has said it's not going to offer any money at all for the construction of a new MIC anywhere else. And so, gee, I mean, there's an interesting message, isn't it? What is the legislature telling us?
Well, it doesn't sound like they're going to be very supportive of the whole tech sector with a, you know, because it's not just the entrepreneurs that get lower cost rent and shared services at MIC. There are a number of other important high-tech entities that live there. The Pacific International Center for High-Tech Research is there. The Hawaii Renewable Energy Development Venture is there.
In fairness, though, the university will probably continue all the university-related offices that are in MIC because, you know, under the existing state of the law, it will revert to the university in 2015. And to the extent that the university has an office in there now, undoubtedly it will keep that office in there. The rest of the space, which is a substantial amount, probably, you know, 3/4 of it, will revert to the university, and the university has said it will use it for, I think it's going to use it for office space. I'm not sure that it's even research space. So what we have is a kind of really worst case result here, because it won't use it to develop startups. It won't use it for entrepreneurship. That'll be over.
That's very frustrating. I mean, the High Tech Development Corp, which is the primary anchor tenant there, does a great job in supporting our tech community. Not just space, but they have a lot of activities, a lot of training. They educate entrepreneurs about the SBIR program, for example. They do a lot of networking. They have their Wetware Wednesday events.
Mm-hmm.
There's just a tremendous amount of value to that organization, and to sort of orphan it off and not support it is very short-sighted.
Well, I mean, it stands a fair chance of just disappearing, actually. Mm-hmm. If you don't have a space and the legislature is not willing to fund you either in, your existing space, or to take your existing space away
and then not fund
a new space, well, what do you do then? And they don't have any budget to rent another building somewhere. So at the end of the day, this could be curtains for the High Tech Development Corporation. And it's more than just the I think it's 40 or so entrepreneur companies, startup companies that are in there now. It's much more than that, because it is a statement. What are they saying? It sounds to me, I mean, could you make any other message out of it? It sounds to me like the legislature doesn't care about the tech community. How is that bill doing? The Carl Fuchs bill?
High Growth Initiative.
High Growth Initiative. How's that one?
Well, the governor asked for $20 million over 2 years over the biennium, and David Ige's committee, one of the finance committees in the Senate, plugged in $8 million. First, they took all the money out, which is typical.
They blanked it.
They blanked it.
Yeah.
And then his committee put $8 million in. The House version of the bill still is blank, so it will go to conference, and they'll haggle over whether they fund it or not. $8 million is pretty small amount of money.
I mean, if it comes out at $8 million after, I thought $20 million was a modest request to start with.
Yeah,
I would have suggested it be for much more than that. So you have the huge benefit of 221 lost. You have all of these tech entrepreneurs who, after that, they left town. Hundreds of them left town, and then you have this, this remnant kind of, startup. I mean, it's not much actually, and then you take away MIC, the one standing symbol of the state's support of the tech industry, and then you take the $20 million request and make it an $8 million request, and that is also jeopardized. There's a fair chance they won't do anything about it.
Yeah, that's very possible.
And then you have a message from our elected representatives in the legislature that they really do not care about developing a tech industry.
Well, it's the frustrating thing, of course, is whenever tourism numbers increase, the motivation to balance the economy with a tech sector goes away. And the unfortunate problem is the only way we're going to grow our economy is to export knowledge-based goods and services.
Yeah, and the tourist hospitality industry in large part is owned by offshore interests and investors, and the profits go offshore. That's the way it works. And the people who work for it here work at low-level, often minimum wage jobs. Even the
They're
people
gonna
who
leave.
work in the hotels now don't want their kids working in those jobs. So, I mean, this is a really bad development because people, after all these years, you and me talking about it, people do not understand that you've got to leverage the economy, and tech is the best way to do that. And still, people do not understand.
Nope, they don't get it.
Well, maybe next session, Bill. Keep your hopes up.
I will. I always do. Thanks,
Thank you,
Jay.
Bill.
And here's Panos Previdoros of the UH College of Engineering with a ThinkTech traffic report, where he examines Honolulu's record-breaking traffic congestion, one intersection at a time.
So what we have here is a segment of Moanalua Freeway, and if you can see my arrow moving on the screen, if we move it this way, we're going towards Red Hill and Eva. We're going to focus today on the other side. See the arrow moving this way. Now we're driving towards town, and where we are exactly is right next to the King Street off-ramp, and the next one is the very messy Middle Street merge. Now, because of the congestion we have every morning there, quite a few people exit this ramp, and as we move along this ramp and the freeway, we're on Google Earth, of course, this is Middle Street. Okay, so here you see that quite a few people exit on Middle Street to go to Kalihi, or also sometimes as a bypass to a very congested freeway. It's a decent alternative we have, a parallel King Street to the freeway, so we can actually make it work better and relieve some of the congestion on the freeway by following King Street to town. And as you can see here is a very wide 3-lane street next to Kalihi Union Church and the dealerships, etc. So that's fine. So it's a wide, high-capacity arterial. But then as you go around some turns, the situation becomes difficult because it goes down to 5 lanes. And on occasion, like here that you see, it's only 2 lanes wide next to these traffic lights. So at this point now we have an arterial street with 2 lanes per direction and the traffic light, which means basically has the throughput of 1 single lane of continuous flow. So this is really then not a very viable alternative to the freeway as a shortcut to town. As we follow, however, good old King Street, it becomes wider in a very short distance, and it continues wide, and we reach now a big intersection with Kalihi Street. It's very wide right there. Then it continues to go down to 4 or 5 lanes here as we move along. And eventually we reach, this is the streams, the Kokea Stream, etc. We follow King Street to town, and let me see now how far we're going. It's still quite wide, but you see now the point that it's a hodgepodge of 4, 5, or 6 lanes wide intersection. And eventually, I believe we arrive right here, which is the big intersection of King Street, continuing through. On the top here, we have Liliha Street, and over here we have Dillingham Boulevard with the twin right turns going to town. Unfortunately, because of this uneven width, King Street, the North King Street as we call it, is not a high-capacity alternative. And with a little bit of work, some utility relocation, etc., this can become a uniform, proper 6-lane arterial that we can have good throughput. In addition, we can route more express buses on it, etc. More interestingly, since this now can become a very viable alternative to the freeway, we also know that downstream from here, after you pass Aala Park, which is right here, it gets very narrow because we go through Chinatown and downtown. So pumping too many cars over here, it may not be the best solution. What would be a better solution is to go back to King Street, and at about this side, where it's a very straight segment, consider 1 or 2 lane tunnel that goes completely under Chinatown and downtown and comes out perhaps on the Iolani Palace side. So we have an express situation and thinking like, for example, Stockholm in Sweden. They have done several crisscross tunnels like that to expedite traffic through the city for people going across. That will make the situation in downtown way, way better. In addition, if you recall, Judge Tashima has also asked the city, that's the judge who looked at the federal lawsuit against the rail, asked the city to look at the possibility from Dillingham Boulevard, where it makes the curve right here, you see here by Evilay, instead of going through Chinatown by essentially jumping over the stream, going under and bypassing Chinatown and downtown and going on the other side of Beretania Street and providing then less environmental impact. Bottom line, you see now there are ideas about express tunnels for rail or traffic through Chinatown and downtown. So this is something that we need to consider, because any report you look at the city or state level, such analysis is non-existent. So perhaps we should look at it.
We'll be right back to wrap up this week's edition of ThinkTech. But first, we want to thank our underwriters.
Hawaiian Electric Company and its affiliates Miko on Maui and Helco on the Big Island are deeply committed to the communities they serve.
Galen Ho is a senior executive of BAE Systems, a global defense, security, and aerospace company, and CEO of CBI Polymers, a tech company in Hawaii.
The High Tech Development Corporation, the state's leading technology agency attached to the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism.
Castle & Cook Hawaii, with a time-honored legacy that spans more than 160 years and revolves around its mission of investing in Hawaii, creating communities, and providing for the needs of our state.
Hawaii Gas, formerly the Gas Company, a proponent of the Liquefied Natural Gas Initiative, helping Hawaii achieve its transition to clean energy and a better energy future.
Okay, Maria, that wraps up this week's edition of ThinkTech. Remember, you can watch ThinkTech on OC16 several times every week. Can't get enough of it, just like Jay Fidel does. For additional times, check out OC16.tv.
Totally, Duke! For lots more ThinkTech videos and for underwriting and sponsorship opportunities on ThinkTech on OC16, visit thinktechhawaii.com, be a sponsor or a volunteer, and help us reach Hawaii.
I'm Duke Oishi. Thanks so much for joining us on ThinkTech. You can watch this show throughout the week and tune in next Sunday evening for our next important weekly episode. Aloha, everyone.
I'm Maria Kashem. See you next time.
ThinkTech raises public awareness.